The Justin Robert Young podcast is brought to you by The Contender, the game of presidential debate. Okay, so last week we had the big politically incorrect deck flash sale. This week we are going to Iowa. Yes, the place where we officially begin this season's presidential contest. The election season officially begins, and it begins with The Contender. Don't be left behind. Go to thecontender.us and buy your own base deck. Also, make sure you go ahead and get on our mailing list where you're going to get some really fun exclusive information. That's not how you do it. You just go ahead. Figure it out. We're gonna have a great time together. Thecontender.us. Also buy patreon.com/JuRY. This is where you can download not only this podcast, but also my One Mic Politics podcast, Politics. Go ahead and check it out. Thank you to everybody who is supporting us. It is where we get the money to go to Iowa and cover it for you guys. Patreon.com/JuRY. Hey, model baby.
But that's fine, 'cause you're pretty ugly by most people's standards, but you're alright by mine.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Justin Robert Young podcast. This is going to be an amazing episode, if just because it will be an episode in which you will not get my darling chat room in its full bloom. You won't. You want to know why? Do you want to know why? It's because Comcast, the lovely people at Comcast, have decided that my internet's going to be craptacular. So if you are watching this on video, you are watching it on YouTube. If you are listening to this on the internet, on your audio player of choice, then you're going to do it via there. The live audience for which I rely upon very personally to make this something special, will not be here tonight. And who knows if it will be at some point. I'm going to keep trying to fiddle with this thing. Hopefully Comcast comes through. But for everybody in second, third, fourth day listening and viewing, that matters not. What are we going to talk about? Well, folks, we are going to talk about fear. We are going to talk about a drug to cure fear. And we are going to talk about a moment in which I had maybe my biggest journalistic failure. We've got a million different emails about snow, very, very apt, because we had the snowpocalypse out there on the East Coast this week. And we have got plenty of stories to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, with a tear in my eye, I can tell you that restaurant managers are among the worst people on the planet. So let's go ahead and start out with this. I mentioned up at the top during the Contender read that we are going to be in Iowa. Let me give you guys some of the details right now. If you are in the Des Moines area, this is going to be the most that I have personally ever done any kind of outreach, any kind of meetups. This is going to be just nothing but everybody hanging out. So do me a favor. If you are in Des Moines, here's where I want you to go. Thursday, January 28th from 5:30 p.m. on. We're going to be at Mayhem Comics. That's 7500 University Avenue. Friday, the 29th, we are going to be at Carl's Place, the bar Carl's Place, from 6 to 10. That's 1620 Woodland Avenue. Saturday at 2 p.m., an afternoon session. We're going to be at Up Down Arcade Bar at 500 Locust Street, and more to come. Go to facebook.com/thecontendergame or twitter.com/contendergame if you want all this information. I want you guys there. This is going to be something super rad. You know, I again, there's never in my life been a situation where I've just gone out and hung out with people kind of as my job. I'm going to very, very, very much rely on you guys making it a super fun time. All right. This whole Iowa process has been a little fear-inducing. I mean, I guess that we're going to talk about fears. Maybe I just have that in my head. Very anxiety-driven. I'm very excited about it because the Contender as a financial operation is something that we've got a lot of money into. We are in the opposite end. I'm so worked up about this here that I'm knocking my mic over. We are in a weird place where we have all inventory and massive debt, right? So we need to sell the inventory to pay off the debt and then eventually make money. But I very much feel like a Ben Carson, like a Ted Cruz, like a Bernie Sanders. We need to have Iowa go well. We need to do well. We need to have people play the game, have people like it, maybe get a little press. And the pressure on that has been something very, very unique because I found myself at the opposite end of where I have been historically. Throughout my life, I have always been the person on the receiving end of PR notices. I've been on the receiving end of press releases, on the receiving end of pleas for someone to cover something. And yet now I am the beggar. I am the pleader. I am the one trying to make my case that this is something you need to cover. And in that, it's kind of made me sort of reassess how all of my feelings are on it. You know, now I immediately, there's nothing like putting yourself on one end of an empathetic spiral to bring up all of the defenses that you can create for it. You know, it is just something that is very, very, very unique. It is very, 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 interesting to see. Because I found myself this week going through a list of all the media outlets there in Des Moines, every radio station, every blog, every television station, every newspaper, and sending them all the information that we have coming up with this. Because I think this is going to be something really fun. I think we're going to have a bunch of people where we're going to have, a real fun time. The card caucus is what we're doing. Every time that you play a round of the Contender, the winner of that round gets to add a point to their candidate's cause. And at the end, on Monday, the day of the big Iowa caucus, we're going to walk on down. Well, not walk, we're going to drive and give a big prize and let the candidate know that their man or woman won the card caucus. And that will hopefully give them a little momentum leading into the actual caucus itself. So, the fact that we are now chasing coverage has made me really, really, really feel bad for every time that I got a press release. And I was just like, whatever. Who cares? Who cares about all this? This is just nonsense. This is just people begging for free advertisement. If you loved it so much, if you believe so much in it, why didn't you just buy an ad, is what I would say as a jaded journalist. And now I understand. It's because I don't have money for an ad. I just need somebody to come out and talk about this so we can sell more of our widgets. Anywho, we're going to get into fear, and we're going to get into more failures of me as a journalist coming up right after this. Article from the New York Times, a drug to cure fear. This brings up a bunch of research here that's been done about conquering fear and conquering panic attacks, whether it's the fear of being embarrassed while talking to strangers or the dread of being attacked while walking down a dark street after you've been assaulted, a symptom of PTSD. You have learned that previously harmless situations predict something disastrous. But have faith. Neuroscience and psychology now, based on research from the University of Amsterdam, say that there might be better living through chemistry. That is whether or not we can use a pill to make you less afraid. As soon as I read this, I began to think about a story that we did when I used to work on a show called G4 Underground. G4 Underground, as you may be aware, is a show that is G4. G4 is still around, right? G4 was going to go away, and now it I don't think it did or it has. But we did a documentary program that was produced by Andrew Main and Mary Jarris. It was hosted, by Morgan Webb. Did a great job, and it was a documentary series that was spawned off one episode called I'm in a Silicon Valley Fight Club. And it was people here in the Bay Area that got their jollies by going into underground basement fight clubs and getting out some of their primal aggression. So we wound up getting picked up for, I believe, 6 episodes of G4 Underground. And in those 6 episodes, everybody was pitching ideas. One of the ones that came up was brain steroids, or specifically the idea that there would be performance enhancers in professional video games. Because there had been some research about concert musicians, violinists, or people like that, people for whom have very, 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 very specific performance anxiety. They're very well trained, but yet the only thing that can kind of screw themselves up is themselves. And there was some research in people taking anxiety medicine, taking beta blockers specifically, Adderall specifically, to focus themselves so they would not let the size of the crowd get to them, and they could just let their muscle memory take over. And so we assumed that it was at least a worthwhile thing on a gaming network, on a news program on a gaming network, to investigate whether or not this was possible, or whether or not the culture of professional video games dictated that this was either cool or not cool. So we did a bunch of research, and I went and posted in a bunch of forums, and G4, we talked to Attack of the Show, G4 Underground. No, we were a whole nother show. We weren't part of the clique, the inside clique at G4. We worked in our own offices. We weren't near any of the other shows. We talked to people at Attack of the Show, and we were like, hey, man, what do you think about this? And they said, yeah, that doesn't exist. You're barking up the wrong tree. That dog don't hunt. And we're like, well, it doesn't really help us in terms of looking out for stuff. But let's go ahead and try it. Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's figure it out. So we We go and I'm trying to follow up leads, and I'm talking to brain doctors and everything so we can get background on it. And then finally we get a little bit of a nibble. A kid says, hey, I've taken these in a tournament. I'm like, you willing to talk on camera? He says, yeah. All right, cool. So we dispatch a camera to his home. And we say, all right, well, tell us about it. And he does, and talks about how he took a brain drug. I forget what he said he did during a tournament to give himself a competitive advantage. We also interviewed another famous professional gamer. It was a nice little tight package. Except for this. A couple weeks later, we get communication from the kid's father. The kid's father says, hey, listen, not only did my kid not do anything, he's lying to you literally for the lulz. He's got a bunch of friends on some message board that he saw my post and said, you want to know what? I could lie to them and I could go ahead and make it on here and we could all have a great big laugh. So we found out before this thing aired that it was incorrect, that it was not the case, that this kid had lied to me directly so he could get on television and say that he had taken beta blockers, or I think it was Adderall. I think he was saying that he did Adderall, which was a huge blow because for me, as a newspaper journalist where you're going every day, accuracy, or at least the methods to protect your accuracy, are sacrosanct. It's the only thing you have. The only reason why people should be picking up your newspaper or clicking on your website is because you have a relentless drive for the truth. Tell the truth. And we didn't. We got had. Bamboozled. This kid was a fraud. He was an absolute fake. Phony. And so I talked to the powers that be, and I'm like, hey, listen, number one, I done goofed. What do we do about it? The answer? Well, in the world of in the world of television, not a whole hell of a lot. We can't go back. We can't publish a note. We can't re-edit the episode at this point. The whole thing's already done. It's already in the gun. It's ready to be shot. All we got to do is sit on it and know that this kid played us for an absolute fool. And so whenever I think about the science of fear, the science of conquering your own fear so you can live a better life, that's always what I think of. We're going to skip the rest of the segments here and get right into your emails, starting right after this. You can email the show, justinrobertyoung@gmail.com. Again, that is justinrobertyoung@gmail.com. Let's go ahead and get into. We had a couple threads that ran through that ran through our last few episodes. Let's begin with snow. Talked a lot about snow. I reiterated my hatred of the concept of snow. We had a lot of snow defenders write in. Here are 3 of them. Todd writes in, Hi, Justin. Regarding snow, here's where I agree. Adults who willingly live in snow are somewhat masochistic, although I wouldn't trade northern Michigan summers for anything. And I'll go ahead and vouch for that. Some of the best summer days I've ever seen in my entire life were in Syracuse, New York, where in the winter it is colder than the surface of Mars. However, here's where I disagree. It's the farthest thing from child abuse. Kids love snow. I've never met a kid who doesn't love snow. Snowmen, snow angels, snowball fight, sledding, skiing, snowshoeing, snowmobiling, ice skating, hockey. They love it. It's not until our brains become fully developed that we realize it's Satan's dandruff. Also, I haven't gotten my socks wet from going out in the snow in years. You're wearing your boots wrong. Please don't die. Todd, first off, I'm going to chastise you for blaming the victim. Way to go ahead and put it on me. I'm not wearing my boots right. Well, it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't have dressed that way. And I also find a whole lack of validity to your argument about the kids. You want to know what else kids love? Cake, candy. They can't get enough of it. Does it mean it's good for them? No, absolutely not. All right? And I'm not saying that kids can't have snow every once in a while. Go vacation in snow. Snow's perfectly fine to visit. It's a delightful substance when you can leave it. The point of this is not that kids enjoy snow. It's that living in snow is horrible and barbaric, and you are permanently damaging these youngsters, and you should feel bad about it. Ken writes, winter in the north builds character. Even in the modern age, you still have to make certain changes to how you go about your daily life to survive in winter. The fact that going outside unprepared has the potential to kill you makes you a better person. I don't claim to know why that is, but I know it to be true. Whatever you think that your personal character flaws would be non-existent if you had grown up in the wintry north. You Johnny Rebs can pass out drunk in a ditch, then wake up the next morning, dust yourself off, and get on with your lives. In the north, you'd freeze to death. I'm not saying we don't have drunks. I'm saying that being a drunk requires more thought and effort, otherwise you'll die. Old people from Michigan don't move to Florida because it's just so much better than Michigan or because they love having a 3 p.m. rain shower every day. It's because if they don't move, they'll die. Just listen to Garrison Keillor talk about winter and you'll have a good idea what I'm talking about.
Well, you know, when you think about snow, you think about all the times that you could be doing some shooters down at the local pub, and then you walk out and you say, hey, I'm so drunk, I'm going to pee in the snow, and then you fall down and you die. You know, you walk out and you say, hey, where's that bloated corpse come from? Turns out it was old Joe, fell in the snow and died. I'm Garrison Keillor. Here's a bluegrass band.
I hate Garrison Keillor, by the way. I hate Prairie Home Companion. I mean, not personally. I'm sure Garrison Keillor's a really, really nice guy personally, right? I just don't like Prairie Home Companion, and I find it to be cloying and annoying. Okay. Hey, how about this? You want to know what else is great and builds character and gives you a whole new outlook on life? Prison. Does that mean that you should be going to prison voluntarily? No. A lot of people who come out of prison say, you want to know what? My life was on the wrong track, but that prison snapped me right back into place. You can learn these lessons other ways. You don't need to have an apocalyptic, terrifying, murderous weather system to have you learn the lesson that you shouldn't be out drinking so long that you fall asleep in a ditch, for which I've only done once. And it was in Florida, so I didn't die. Crunchy, finally, someone on my side writes, I love when you talk about cold and snow because I couldn't agree with you more. It's great seeing somebody else feel strongly about it. Then again, I'm the spawn of Satan or something because I use a space heater in the summer in Texas. Jesus, lady. When I was in Ohio a couple months ago, I told my parents that raising kids there was like child abuse. The heat was set on 62 degrees, and on top of that, I couldn't sleep for days because with all my allergies out there, I could hardly even breathe. Luckily, it hadn't snowed yet, because when it does, since I'm only 4'10", the snow not only gets my socks wet, but my pants as well, all the way up to my knees. So basically, between hay fever and snow, I was absolutely miserable there for 6 months out of the year. I feel like they have to know how horrible it is and shouldn't be offended when somebody says so. If they try to say otherwise, you're right and they're lying. Finally, somebody who has the sense to tell the truth. Meanwhile, on Battlestar Galactica, I don't know if you guys remember this. We had somebody write in and say that they had in their life had bisexual encounters and that they wanted to admit it to their wife of 7 years. Now, they don't want to cheat. They don't necessarily want to go out and engage in what he called cheeky cock and bum fun. But he did feel like he was being dishonest with his wife if he did not tell her. So he writes in with an update. Following on your advice over the Christmas break, while watching a movie on the couch, I talked to my fiance about being bisexual. She was fine with it. Surprisingly fine, in fact. Her exact words were, "This explains a lot." I asked her what she meant by that, and there, in an awkward silence, she then narrowed her eyes and said, "You're still not putting anything in my butt." She returned her gaze to the television. That's where poop comes out. Fair point. So I was worried about nothing for 7 years. Cheers for the advice. Life is getting better, but sadly, still no cock and bum fun. All right. Well, you want to know what? There we go. We got ourselves a little progress here. Thank you for taking my advice. And again, man, honesty, usually 99.9% of the time, the best policy, even when it's been around for a while. Because this is where we get into these spirals, right? You get into these like big, deep spirals where at the end of the day, you're like, well, now I can't say the truth because of all the other days that I didn't say the truth. When really that's completely fake. That's completely invented. And it's a problem that if you acknowledge it is so self-defeating because you better say it now because you don't want to add another day to that till. It's never too late to declare bankruptcy in the court of honesty, right? Even if you've got a million days where you haven't told somebody something, but they need to know, tell them today. Tell them tomorrow, unless it's something really, really, really crazy. All right, we got a bunch of emails about your terrible restaurant manager stories. Boy, are these people total pieces of garbage. Let's go ahead and get to that right after this. Again, email the show, JustinRobertYoung@gmail.com, JustinRobertYoung@gmail.com. Talked a lot about restaurant managers last week, and we have some awesome stories that came in from you guys. Tristan writes, I worked in a hotel kitchen in a small town in Canada. One day, the chef/manager seemed to be in a particularly bad mood, freaking out on me and my fellow cook for the stupidest things. He came into the kitchen and saw our empty pop glasses from earlier on the counter. And this time he totally freaks, swipes the glasses into the garbage can with his arm, then storms into the back, where he proceeds to kick a full bus pan of romaine lettuce down the stairs, sending stuff everywhere. Turned out, he was pissed off because I'd spent most of my shift flirting quite successfully with the hot 16-year-old hostess. So when you talked about 15-year-old hostesses on the show, I swear I laughed so hard. It's cliche that I didn't know existed until you mentioned it. P.S. I was 17 at the time, so hitting on 16-year-old girls is not something that I do anymore. But totally makes sense there. Man, you got to watch out. These restaurant managers are the worst. They are just the worst. Gladstone writes, I worked in a high-end restaurant in a town in New York for about 2 years, and the manager there was a great guy. But My friend, who at the time was in high school as well, also got hired there. She was a sweet girl, very cute, and yep, you guessed it, he made her the hostess and proceeded to hit on her all night, every night. That being said, he also did hit on the of-age hostess. Now, I did not say that it was only terrible. It was only underage hostesses that were being targeted here, but it is certainly, not exclusively, certainly just a general perviness, a pervasive perviness that we are identifying here. Sarah writes in, I was at my new Sonic drive-in store. Okay, so here we go. Sarah wrote in a couple Sonic drive-in stories. And man, both of them are great. One of them was about the manager stealing tips, which, another thing, if you are a server and your manager is making you, having everybody go in and kick in their tips, and then they tip you back out, you better make sure that you're talking to the other servers, because that is how they rob you. Just so you know. That's how that happens. They will come back, not that good of a night. Anyway, here's $13. That is how they rob you. Because again, restaurant managers, just ne'er-do-wells, almost universally. So here we go. Here's another story from Sarah. I was at my new Sonic drive-in store, and I learned to count my own till. We had a manager who had come from Brazil. He was in his mid-40s. He would constantly tell us 16-year-old girl car hops in his country we would be women already, and he could marry any of us. Creepy, right? Well, one Saturday morning, I had to open the store with him since I lived about an hour away. I always seemed to get there about 5 minutes late. I was 16 and had no time management skills. And when I walk in to get my pre-started, what do I see but the Brazilian manager banging one of the 16-year-old car hops on the pre-table where I was about to make onion rings. Being horrified by what I saw, I walked out knowing they hadn't seen me. Called in on my very old 90s cell phone and said I was sick and therefore would not be able to make it. I never ate anything on that anything from there again, but it would not be the last time that I saw the pre-table used in a sexual manner. Sarah, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and write in and tell me all the other sexual things that you saw on that pre-table, because I need people to understand. All the non-restaurant workers out there, you need to understand that this is the fallujah of common businesses. These are not normal. These are not like a retail job. This is not like an office job. Animals work at restaurants. I need all of the dirty restaurant stories, because you need to understand this. This is something that will make your life better as soon as you realize it. Also, by the way, you wrote that, Sarah, I'm kind of going to go ahead and take the guess that you were involved in some sort of sexual contact on that pre-table. I'm just going to say it. It's fine. It's no shame, no harm, no foul. Sarah continues. I hope this is entertaining to you. I have tons more stories in my 29 years on this earth, and at least 10 of those were in restaurants and retail stores. Thanks for all that you do, Justin. Thank you, Sarah. You are certainly a credit to your race. Chris P. writes, Story 1 starts with a franchise chain restaurant in a relatively small resort town. The manager of the restaurant was notorious for hiring incredibly attractive 16 to 17-year-old girls. Are you guys picking up on this yet? Are you guys understanding? This has been the most email that we've gotten about something. This is not just something I made up and people took a cue. We barely lanced this boil, and this is what's coming out. Almost universally, these restaurant managers are hiring sexy, underage girls that they try to at the least hit on and at the most have sex with. This is an entire class of people. We continue. My roommate and I routinely held parties for the restaurant at our terrible basement bachelor pad where everybody would show up after work. One particular party, our early 30s manager shows up with one of the new hostesses who was turning 17 that weekend and wanted to celebrate. The manager ended up taking the chick to the bath. They smash, he takes off, and then she proceeds to pull a train at the party with about a half dozen dudes. I go to bed in disgust and lock my door. Hours later, the party dies down and I hear a small knock on my door. I ignore the tapping and roll over. Then a moment later, I hear a knock on my roommate's door, which is next to mine. Seconds later, I hear the unmistakable mating call of two drunk individuals having sex. The following morning, I woke up to her cooking naked in our apartment. No one ever spoke of that night or at later parties or on shift, and that chick ended up working for the restaurant for years until one day she was locked up with her boyfriend for making meth. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and assume that there was more than just alcohol at those parties. That seems like the kind of party that, that there's some chicanery. There's a little craziness happening. Anyway, thanks you to everybody. I want more dirty restaurant stories. I want more terrible, gross, ooky, disgusting restaurant stories. I want stories about cooks. I want stories about servers. I want more stories about terrible, gross, pervy restaurant managers. Write them in, justinrobertyoung@gmail.com. But folks, this has been a technically challenged episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Look for more content. We'll be doing an extra episode in Iowa this week. Might not be on Sunday, but we'll get something else out there in the feed. If you find yourself blowing a story on a G4 news magazine, if you find yourself taking brain pills so you can conquer your fear, if you find yourself getting banged on the pre-table at a Sonic drive-in, and if you find yourself admitting over a movie that you are indeed bisexual, folks, remember your old pal Justin Robert Young is here to tell you one spectacular fact that you need to keep in mind, and that is, please, don't.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.